Hey gang, today I wanted to take you through my process for a heavy metal minimalist style Crimson Fist. I'll make more for other legions, chapters, and factions, and cover theory like lighting and composition all here on this channel. Step 1. Base coats. For the blue areas, I'm using Imperial Navy from the Army Painter. If you prefer Warhammer brand paint, then Night Lord's blue should be good. We just want a saturated dark blue. Crimson Fists are a more purple-leaning blue with crimson accents, so this actually turned out to be one of my favorites to paint due to the nice soft contrast between the colors complementing each other. This base layer is meant to color the Nuln Oil wash we'll do over the top. This is so I don't have to use multiple different colored shades over different colored parts, and instead I can just use Nuln Oil all over and have a color underneath to tint it as needed. This layer doesn't need to be perfect, but try and make the coverage uniform. This will help in step 3 as patchy base coats may show through the top coat later. I did paint the helmet to be a lieutenant, so having the right hand be crimson is legal, but if this was a regular man, then he would only have his left hand crimson. I have used Basilisk Red from the Army Painter, Wordbearer's Red from Warhammer for this. I do the hand glove and the wrist bangle bracelet thing bit above the glove. On some references it's only his hand being crimson, but on other it includes this bangle too. Try and keep these colors neat to where you want, as getting them on each other will show through the Nuln Oil and might end up a bit odd looking with the shadows later, as they're very different colors. However, they are fairly equal in tone, so might not be super noticeable. The aim with this layer is to create that value distance with color and tone, so armor panels and segments like trim are all separated out, so when they're on tabletop you can still see the definition and details of the mini at distance. You don't need to be too pedantic about fixing mistakes however, as these are for tabletop gaming and you won't be 5 centimeters away from the mini like when you're painting. Step 2. Nuln Oil. This bit does not need to be careful, just slop it on. Puddle it in the edges and recesses for darker shadows and try to do entire panels in as few strokes as you can, otherwise you may get tide lines as it dries. Make sure to properly shake your Nuln Oil for a minute, as I've had a couple times I didn't and it's dried glossy because I didn't mix in the pigment with enough medium. While this dries, make a cup of tea and think about how your chapter have distanced themselves from the golden shower yellow of their daddies, unlike Dante, who Norman Bates'd himself into his daddy. Like this video, subscribe, and potentially become a channel member to get exclusive channels in my Discord where I post photos of my kitten and take requests for tutorials to make. I also stream painting on here and Twitch if you want to hang out and ask questions or watch me be bad at Space Marine 2 or other games. Step 3. Top coats. For the blue, I'm using Ultramarine Blue by the Army Painter. Warhammer brand Altdorf Guard Blue is the alternative. This should be a rich Prussian-like blue with slight purple undertones. I prefer this to a more pure blue as it complements the crimson really nicely, where a more blue might clash a little. There is only highlights over this, so make sure you like the color that you use here. On parts that are up against the wall of another panel, these inside edges, I leave about a millimeter or half millimeter gap between my top coat and the crease, so I can have a dark outline to separate the panels a bit and save me from accidentally going up those walls that should be left dark. If you leave the coverage kind of patchy and uneven, this can look more battle-worn, and you can use those brushstroke lines and patchinesses to help plan out any weathering or battle damage you want to add. I don't really do battle damage, and this isn't a tutorial for that, so I'm just doing it kind of thick and keeping it uniform and kind of flat looking. I just prefer it looking super new and clean. Be most careful in the recessed armor, such as on this arm, under his elbow and wrist plate, to not get the brighter top coat on the perpendicular sides of the extruded surfaces. I'm still trying to keep that millimeter or so border on the inside corners, but don't worry too much where the gap gets too thin, as long as those perpendicular sides stay clean and dark. I recommend pick a plane to be at the top, and then keep perpendicular sides dark over the whole mini. If you want to have some extra depth, you can leave any down or backwards facing surfaces with no top coat, and use the top coat color as highlights as per step 4 on those faces instead. For the red accents like the fist, I'm using Army Painter's Pure Red or Warhammer's Wazdacker Red for this. I just do the top sides of the hand and the row of fingies, and then the wrist circle top side, leaving the perpendicular planes shadowed. You should now have this nice contrast between the blue and the red with the neat outlines. Step 4. Highlights. I'm using a mix of ultramarine blue and Kraken lavender by the Army Painter to make a nice pale purpley blue. From Warhammer paints, you could try Altdorf Guard blue with T'Challa lilac. I don't have a ratio for this, but I'd recommend starting with the lavender and adding small dips of ultramarine from the paint you just used on the top coat until you reach a shade that you like. Using the Kraken lavender by itself will be too stark in my opinion, so I made this mix to tone it down and make it match the top coat blue better. Also, by making it more purple leaning, it'll complement the pinky highlight we're gonna do on the crimson. Adding more top coat will lead to more subtle edges, which can be nice if you then use the unmixed highlight paint to do some dot highlights on the corners. So here I'm essentially just outlining all of the top coat panels with outside edges, or like on this elbow panel, a sculpted edge in the middle. Because we're doing these over the top coat, if you make a mess, we can go back over this later with more top coat. Again, try and not slip up onto the dark areas, as it will be harder to fix, as it is the base coat plus Nuln Oil. Use the side of your brush on the corners if you struggle with using the brush tip accurately. If you want more depth, only do these edge lines on front and top facing edges, but I'd only recommend this if you also did this with the top coat as well, like I mentioned previously. Otherwise, go all over and edge up all the cliffs and sculpted edges. I tend to water down my paint a bit for this just so I can use a smaller brush so the paint doesn't dry before I put it on the Mini. This is probably the bit that took the longest, as I wanted to be careful to not have to redo highlights, and to get the thinness of edge lines that I wanted. If you're doing an entire army in this style, then I probably wouldn't recommend sub-assembling like this, but it does help. If you're going into a fully built and glued Mini, only do step 3 onwards on bits you can reach. This will by accident make a nice shadow area behind guns and underarms that will make him look a little more dramatic and lit. With sub-assembly, you can get every surface to look flat and uniform with lighting, so ending with a more cartoony or classic heavy metal result. The only difference this will have to actual heavy metal styling is not doing the highlight lines on the plate surfaces of the shoulders and knees. This is just personal preference. I don't like how it looks, so I don't do it. On the trim, I'm treating this more like metallics, so I tend to pick outer edges or corners to highlight, and then a secondary bright spot if I feel like it needs it. Try and feather out these highlight spots to avoid harsh tide lines. Then on the hand and red accents, I'm using Barbarian Flesh from Army Painter, or Bestigor Flesh from Warhammer. Something like Fulgrim Pink could work too, but it might be too pink without mixing in some of that top coat you used. Again, just highlighting all the edges and dotting the fingies until you are happy. The rest of the owl. From this video, learn the things and put it to use on the rest of the Mini. This style is good for quick, consistent minis that look good with only a handful of paints. In total, this arm took me about 15-20 minutes, not including the Nuln Oil tea break. When I painted the rest of the Mini afterwards, it took about the same time as a single arm, maybe a little longer, as it's a very simple process that's meant to be fast. This is my fully finished Crimson Fist Infernus Marine in this style, with all his markings free-handed on. His heraldries weren't actually that bad to do, they just look kind of intimidating, like me. You can use transfers, I'm just lazy and I don't have a sheet for him to use. If you do use transfers, remember to use matte varnish over the top to get rid of that shininess. And here is a list of all the things I used in this video. And I'll make more videos for the lenses, various guns, and freehanding hacks, so don't panic if yours doesn't look like mine. I don't tend to use transfers, but I can cover those in a video as well if needed. As always, thanks for watching, check out my other hobby content or my dumbass gaming content on the main channel. Like, sub, leave a comment how you got on, Discord is in the description, and see ya!